Edge 105 FM. Grateful, yes, I'm grateful. Like Jazz Elise. Stay tuned.
Yes, we are inside Legal Landscape, Season 6, Episode 11. We're looking at charities, what the new regulations mean for you. Now, you know it is no secret that Jamaica wants to be removed from the Financial Action Task Force's grey list. Therefore, the government's recent legislative agenda has focused on amending our laws to improve the nation's ability to identify and combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. So this is an admirable goal. But what does it mean for charities? Charities rely on financial donations from a variety of sources, and by their nature, give financial assistance to various beneficiaries. So this makes them susceptible to unscrupulous persons that would like to use a charity to make their illegally gained monies appear clean. To combat this, in December last year, Parliament approved the Charities Regulations 2022. Now, in this episode of The Legal Landscape, we will discuss the key changes implemented by these regulations with our guest, attorney and partner at DunnCox, Roxanne Miller. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, this is such a topic because we give so much across Jamaica that we really need to delve into. So, Roxanne, what new documents or information are required to register a charity? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, we know the existing documents you'd expect, the application form, the articles. But now, under this new regime, you also have to submit a detailed plan of your charitable activities and how you plan to disperse the donor funds. So we want specifics now. You also have to submit copies of your administrative and operations management policies and procedures for the charity. So all of these things have to be in writing because you have submitted the application. And there's a new fee. There was no fee before. Now you pay $5,000.
5,000 Jamaican dollars.
Yes, 5,000 Jamaican.
These days you have to make sure,
Yes.
You mentioned administrative and operations management policies and procedures. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So it's basically any policy you use to operate a business, not just a charity. So it's things like your human resources policy, your IT policy, your security data protection, which is very important now, data protection policy, business continuity plan, and if you have an anti-money laundering, which we're talking about now, anti-money laundering policy, you're going to have to submit that as well.
What are the new annual requirements then for charities?
Okay, so charities always had to file an annual return and submit their annual financial statements, but in addition to those now, they're required to submit an auditor's report on the donations. So the auditor has to confirm that the donations the charities received were in fact used for the charitable purpose. Separate from that, they now have to give a report on the fundraising activities and expenditure plans you plan for the upcoming year. So we want that in writing. The authority wants to know what you plan to do. And separate from that again, annual report for the charity. So this is something similar that you'd see listed companies submit a report at the AGM to their shareholders. Charity will have to do something similar now to the authority.
You're listening to Home Run on the Edge. We're inside Legal Landscape. The topic today is charities, what the new regulations mean for you. So you're definitely going to want to listen today to what our guest attorney and partner at DunnCox, Roxanne Miller, is sharing. Can we ask you the new compliance obligations then for the charities?
Right. So we just mentioned all the documents you have to submit annually, but the compliance is ongoing throughout the year. So if you plan to conduct any fundraising activities, this is very common for charities, you need to give the public general information on the reasons why you're collecting these donations. What's the charitable purpose you're going to use it for? You also have to keep detailed records. Records have to be kept of donations for at least 7 years. And you need to separately appoint a compliance officer. So there's somebody in your charity whose job it is to make sure that the charity complies with all its obligations under the law. and you have to change your auditor every 5 years. This is usually a requirement we see with financial institutions, but they're now bringing that compliance obligations to charities.
To charities. There's a title called a protected charity. Can you share with us what is a protected charity?
Okay, so that's a new designation under the regulations that were passed recently. If the minister feels for whatever reason that your particular charity is at risk of being misused or exploited for the purposes of money laundering, he can designate you a protected charity. So you can simply get a notice one day from the minister that you're designated a protected charity, and all the obligations of a protected charity now apply to your charity.
So then what are the obligations of a protected charity?
So in addition to everything I mentioned before, you now have to specifically implement an anti-money laundering policy. So this includes a number of things, but it especially includes putting in procedures that require you to identify and get the credentials of your donors, beneficiaries, and board members. You also have an obligation now, this may sound a little excessive, but you have an obligation to monitor international lists of terrorist organizations to ensure that you're not receiving any funds from them and you're not in any way giving money to them. They're not a beneficiary from you. And you also, separately from that, have to report any suspicious transactions, any suspicious donations, suspicious beneficiaries to the Financial Investigations Division.
Is there a penalty, Roxanne, for any non-compliance?
As with most laws, especially those related to anti-money laundering, of course there is. Virtually any breach of the regulations can result in a summary conviction before the parish court, which can result in a fine or imprisonment for the board members of the charity. So it's very, very important that the board members get a hold of these regulations and get familiar with them so that their charity can comply.
So it's not a whole lot to grasp, but it is a lot to grasp to realize that you can't just set up your charity, and we have all of these rules now to bear in mind. Thank you so much for sharing with us the charities and what the new regulations mean to you. Before you leave, Roxanne, do you have any hashtag Did You Know tidbits for us today? Sure.
I want to tell you that remember that no good deed goes unpunished. Constant compliance is required for charities.
No good deed. Oh, boy. I could hear the humor in that one, and we could see why. You always make it so interesting, you and your partners at DunnCox Attorneys. If there's anyone who has any more questions on this topic, the charities and the new regulations, what those mean to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. They can call me at 922-1500, or they can email me at roxanne.miller@DunnCox.com.
And they may also email DunnCox directly, get in touch with, or go for more information to the website, www.dunncox.com as well, too.
Sure.
Right. Thank you so very much. I know we're going to have a lot of questions from this one because we are a charitable nation. We are a charitable nation. Thank you very much for joining us for this episode 11 of season 6, Legal Landscape. Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Boy, it's like I was thinking, should I ask about the charities now, Patrice? You can't just go in and just say, I'm doing a charity. You have to be registered. And up to date with the new annual requirements for charities. It is now 15 minutes away from 6 o'clock. Let's play some music for you. We'll take some of your responses to our question of the day, and we'll look at $40 million in 40 days up here on The Edge, 105.1, 105.3 FM.